For your POD, okay, I want you to find the slope and the y-intercept. So I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to find your slope and y-intercept. Okay, so we know in standard form, y equals mx plus b. We know that m is slope, so our slope, we know m equals 3, or you could write 3 over 1. And our y-intercept, we know, comes from b, which we can see is 0, 2. Still writing it as a point because our y-intercept, we know x is 0 and y would be 2. So if you could go to your notes. Okay, so today we're going to be learning how to write equations of lines. So normally we're given an equation and then we find the slope and our intercept and then we draw a graph. Well, now they're giving us the opposite info. So if you look at our table here, if you're given slope and a y-intercept, you're going to use slope-intercept form. So you're given m and b, so you're just going to be plugging those in for m and b. Okay, then when you're given a slope m and a point, remember a point is xy, there are two different ways that you can get your equation in slope-intercept form. The first way, you'll start with point slope, so y minus y1 equals m, our slope, times x minus x1. So we'll use point slope to transform it into slope-intercept form. Okay, we'll get into that when we get into the examples, but you're trying to get y by itself to look like y equals mx plus b. The whole point of transforming equations is to get it to look like slope-intercept form. Okay, the second option is to use slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b. Okay, in a point you get x and y, and they give you m. So you're plugging in information for y, m, and x, trying to find b. So once you get b, you'll plug that and slope into your slope-intercept form. Okay, you can also be given 2 points. Okay, remember with 2 points, you always find slope. So that's always going to be your first step, find slope. Once you find slope, you're going to use 1 point and slope, and you're going to follow the steps like we did above. So once you find slope, if it helps, I would cross out a point so you're only focusing on one. So you can either use point slope form and transform it, or you can find the slope, use your 1 point, so your x and y, plug it into slope-intercept form to find b, and then plug that back in to our y equals mx plus b. Okay, so if we look at our first example here, we want to write the slope-intercept form. So if it helps, I would write y equals mx plus b, so we know that's what we're trying to get. When you're given the slope and an intercept, so we know slope is our m, and our y-intercept is b. So all we have to do is plug in our slope for m and our intercept for b. So we know y equals, my slope m is 3, so I have 3x, and my y-intercept is -2, so minus 2. So now that we have it in slope-intercept form, that's all that we have to do. So these are the easiest problems that they give you. When they give you the slope and the intercept, you just plug it directly in. So I want you to do the next two at your seat, so I'll give you a couple minutes to do that, and then we'll go over them. So again, if it helps, I would put y equals mx plus b. Okay, so I want you to do those next two at your seat. Okay, so if we look at this one, we know y equals, my slope was -2/5. and we want to keep x because they didn't tell us anything about x. And my y-intercept is 4. So since there's not a negative with that, we know that's a plus 4. That would be a positive. Okay, on the next one, so still wanting slope-intercept form, I know my slope is negative 3/2. And then my y-intercept is 0. Now, do we have to keep plus 0? Is that going to change anything? No, so we can just get rid of that. And we can be left with y equals negative 3/2 x. Because the 0 is not going to change anything for our slope-intercept form. Okay, so next we want to come up with our equation given a point and a slope. Okay, so if we would look back at the table, it tells us when we're given a slope and a point, okay, the first way we can use point-slope form. So I'm going to write my equation for point-slope form for the first way. So y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to label x1, y1, and m. So I'm going to take all that info they give us and plug it in. So I know y1 is 1, so minus, because that is a minus right there, 1 equals n, which we know is negative 4, times the quantity of x minus, we have a negative 2, so minus negative 2. Now think back before, when we had minus and negative, what did that mean? What did that change to? So we can rewrite it, and that becomes a plus. So minus and negative means plus, so we want to change that. Okay, so now to keep transforming, what do you do with a number that's outside of your parentheses with no sign in the middle? We want to distribute. So y minus 1 equals negative 4x minus 8. And if you remember, our main goal is to get y by itself. So if I want to get y by itself, how do you get rid of a minus 1? We would add 1. If you add 1 to the left side, you have to add it to the right side. So y equals, because these will eliminate, negative 4x, and negative 8 plus 1 is negative 7. So we have our slope-intercept form, which is the main goal of transforming equations. So that was the first way you could do it. So if we look at the second way, okay, looking back at our chart, you're going to use slope-intercept form to find b. So I'm going to write y equals mx plus b. And in a point, you know x and y. So I know 1 equals, my slope is negative 4, and x is negative 2. So times negative 2, we're trying to find b. So now we're just simplifying. So what do we know about negative 4 times negative 2? What's that give us? We get 8 plus b. And then to get b by itself, how do we get rid of a positive 8? We would subtract. So we know negative 7 equals b. So now we take our slope, m, and b, and we plug it back into slope-intercept form. So y equals negative 4x minus 7. So if you look both ways, both methods, you still get the same formula, same equation, y equals negative 4x minus 7. So the next example, we're going to do both ways still. And then after that, you can pick the method that you like. So you don't always have to do two. You're just picking whichever one you think is easier. Okay, so if we look here, we're still giving a point and a slope. So the first way is to use our point-slope form. Okay, so we know again in a point we get x1, y1, and m. Okay, so I'm going to plug in y minus, we have negative 4, equals, my slope is 1/7, and then x and x1 is 0, so minus 0. So now I want to try to reduce the left side. So minus and negative, remember we said becomes a plus. And then we still want to distribute on the right side. So 1/7 times x, we get 1/7 x. And then 1/7 times 0, remember what is anything times 0? 0. So do we have to write 0? I mean, we can, but in the end we end up getting rid of it. And then we still want to focus on getting y by itself. So how do you get rid of a plus 4? We want to subtract 4. And if you do it to one side, you have to do it to the other. So y equals, can we combine these two together? No, because 4 doesn't have an x. We cannot combine them. So it's just 1/7 x minus 4. So now it looks like slope-intercept form. Okay, so that was the first way. Now if we do the second way, so that's using slope-intercept and finding our b, so we can plug in y, which is negative 4, equals my slope, 1/7, and they tell us x is 0, plus b, because that's what I'm trying to find. So I know negative 4 equals 1/7 times 0, we know, is 0. So we know b equals negative 4. So we're going to take our b and our m, and we're going to plug it into our slope-intercept. So y equals 1/7 x minus 4. Now, did anyone notice what this point is called up here? Remember, that's a y-intercept. So really, they gave you a slope and an intercept. So if you recognize that right away, could you go right to this step? Yes. So if they give you a y-intercept, you don't even have to do this work if you realize that's your y-intercept. I mean, if not, you can still do the work and you'll get the same answer, but you could just skip right to this. Only when you are given a y-intercept. Okay, so I want you guys to try this one. Okay, so again, if it helps, I would label x1, y1, and m. So you can either do the first method or the second method. So do whichever method you think works best for you. So I'll give you a couple minutes to do this, and then we will go over it. Okay, so if you chose the first method, so we're going to go over both, but we'll do the first method first. We can plug in the information they give us, so y minus 9 equals 6 times x minus 2. So just plugging in what they give us. We can distribute our 6, so y minus 9 equals 6x minus 12. To get the y by itself, we want to add 9. So we know y equals 6x minus 3. So we have it in slope-intercept form. Okay, if you chose the second way, we know x, y, and m. So 9 equals 6 times 2 plus b. So we know 9 equals 12 plus b. And to get b by itself, we want to subtract 12 from both sides. So negative 3 equals b. So just like we were doing before, if you chose this method, we're going to plug in b and m back into my slope-intercept form. So y equals 6x minus 3. So either method that you choose, you should still get the same equation. Okay, so now, if you notice, we're given 2 points. So think about what you always found before when you're given 2 points. Right, we would find slope, which we know m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, which if you happen to forget that, if you look back at our chart, when you're given 2 points, you find slope first. In either method, you're finding slope, which your formula is right here. So first thing we're going to do is find our slope. So I know m equals, and if it helps, I would label x1, y1, x2, y2. So this is what we just had our quiz over. So we know 3 minus 0 over negative 2 minus 1. So m equals 3 over negative 3, which would give me negative 1. Could you put over 1? Yes, but you can just leave it as negative 1. So now that I have a slope, I'm going to pick my slope and focus with 1 point. So once I pick my 1 point, I'm going to cross out the one I'm not using anymore. Okay, so if we use our first method, we have a point and a slope, so I'm going to plug it in to my point and slope form. And again, whichever method you used before, that's what you can use again. So I'm just going to do both methods. So if you don't use this method, you don't have to write this one down. So I know y minus 0 equals m, which is negative 1, times x minus 1. So I can distribute. So y, since I have minus 0, do I need that anymore? Nope. So y equals negative x plus 1. Okay, if you use the second method, using our y equals mx plus b, okay, we know y is 0 equals, my slope is negative 1, and x is 1 plus b. So 0 equals negative 1 plus b, and my goal is to get b by itself, so I want to add 1 to both sides, so I know b equals 1. So plugging in my slope and b, I know y equals negative x plus 1. Now could you put the negative 1x? You sure can. If that makes more sense to you, you can leave it because it's the same exact thing. Okay, so these are just like the problems we did before, except now we're finding slope before we plug it in to our formulas. Okay, so looking at the next one, I want you to find slope first, and then pick which method you want to choose. So I want you to do this one at your seat, and then we'll go over it. Okay, so if you chose, well, I guess first we have to find our slope. So we know x1, y1, and x2, y2. So we know m equals 3 minus 1 over negative 3 minus 5, which would give me 2 over negative 8, which can we reduce 2 over negative 8? Yeah, we know m equals negative 1/4. So I have slope, and remember, you just need slope and 1 point.
You're trying to contact the supervisor's office. You're trying to contact the supervisor's office.
It doesn't matter which point you use. I always cross off the second one, but you could always use that one. Okay, so I always use the first point and my slope. So if you chose method 1, okay, our y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. So I know x and y and m, so y minus 1 equals my negative 1/4 times x minus 5. So we want to distribute. So we get negative 1/4 x minus, oh, well, negative times a negative. Is that a negative? We want a plus and 5/4. Now, could you write 1 and 1/4? Yes, you could. Okay, and then to get y by itself, we want to add 1. Okay, and if you're going to leave it as an improper fraction, think if you add 1, that's equivalent to 4 over 4. So 5 plus 4, we know y equals negative 1/4 x plus 9/4. Now if you wrote it the other way, you could have 2 and 1/4, that's fine also, or you can leave it as 9/4. Okay, if you chose the second way, using y equals mx plus b, or slope-intercept form, we know 1 is equal to negative 1/4 times 5 plus b. Then to add our 5/4, we know b equals 9/4, so we can plug in b and m. So we get y equals negative 1/4 x plus 9/4. So again, we're still getting the same answer with either method that we choose. And you still only have to do one, so you're just picking the method that works best for you. Okay, so I'd like you to do this one on your own. So again, remember, 2 points, you always find slope, so I want you to find slope first, and then you're just picking method 1 or method 2, so whichever one works for you. So I want you to take the time and do this one at your seat. Okay, so first thing we want to do is find our slope. Okay, so we know negative 3. We have minus and negative, so we know that becomes a plus over 3 minus 4. So for our numerator, the top, we get 2 over negative 1, which we know then m equals negative 2. So now we have our slope and we can pick a point. So again, once you pick a point, if it helps, cross off the point we're not using anymore so you don't get confused. So if you chose the first method using point slope, you have y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. So we know y minus my y1 is negative 5, which becomes a plus, equals negative 2 times x minus 4. So now we can distribute. We get y plus 5 equals negative 2x. A negative times a negative gives me a positive. And my last step, to get y by itself, we just want to subtract 5. So y equals negative 2x plus 3. So still keeping it in slope-intercept form, getting y by itself. Okay, if you chose the second method, that's using our slope-intercept form. Okay, we know y is negative 5. M, our slope, is negative 2. And x is 4. So I have negative 5 equals negative 8 plus b. Okay, and to get rid of a negative 8, we want to add. So I know 3 equals b. So now I have my slope still, and a b. So I can just plug that right back in to slope-intercept form. So y equals negative 2x, and my b is plus 3. Okay, so for tomorrow, okay, make sure you bring your device, okay, because you're going to have a worksheet going over our notes that we had today, which you can always get back on Canvas and watch the notes again if you need to. But I will have a video going over a couple of the problems on your worksheet. So if you remember your device, you can get steps walking you through a couple of the problems on your homework for tomorrow. So make sure again that you bring your device tomorrow. So we're finished for today, so you can just work on something else quietly and make sure you put your notes in your binder. Have a great day.